Hello everybody, Jake, your resident content cowboy here, and here we are. A brand new set, Wisdom of the Sea and Sky, has dropped, and it is time to talk about what the new meta looks like. This is actually a really interesting set, in my opinion, because unlike some previous sets, I feel like it hasn't drastically changed the meta, even though we have a lot of new exciting cards to play around with and some really cool new decks. We also have a ton of meta staples from previous sets that are doing really well. In a lot of ways, super healthy for the game, and I'm surprised that we don't have more standout EXs, but I'm going to talk in this video about a lot of the new cards that are doing well, as well as some of the older meta decks that are absolutely crushing it. This will help you climb through ranked, and I'll kind of give you an idea of which decks are like pretty dang good and which decks are the absolute best in the meta as we are going through them. I want to start, however, talking about new decks, because there are a few new decks that are amazing. Let's talk about Espeon EX. Espeon EX was looked at before this set by me specifically as well as being kind of okay, you know, 2 energy, 80 damage with a little healing that you're able to put either onto the active spot or someone on the bench. We haven't had a lot of cards in Pocket that have taken a huge advantage of healing, so that's why this card seemed kind of underwhelming. It sort of looked like a slightly better Cresselia, right? But this card ended up being amazing, not only because of the healing, not only because of the 80 damage, which is actually a much nicer breakpoint than Sylveon EX's 70, but also because it is a Psychic Eevee and it pairs super well with the other Psychic Eevee, Sylveon EX. Sylveon EX being able to pair with this deck means you draw through everything in your deck. You can run Eevee Bag, you can run a ton of support cards that you need, and you can also pair this with a base Sylveon to do some really impressive damage. A version we can take a look at is one of the ones that did really well in a recent tournament, is also paired with a base Espeon. So you've got 2 Eevees and 2 Eevee EXs, so you can have a full bench, right? 2 Sylveon EXs, 2 Espeon EXs, a base Sylveon, and a base Espeon. The version I had been playing before and I think is really good did not have the base Espeon, but obviously this opens up a lot of opportunities for you to KO things that can't be hurt by some of these Eevees and to really punish enemies that are stacking an insane amount of energy. Shout out to Sekaru, who ran this deck in the recent Ursi Day tournament and did very, very well. Whether you play this version or the version I showed, this is one of the better decks to rank up in the game right now. Sticking with some of the new decks here, let's talk about Lugia EX and Ho-Oh EX. There are a few versions of Ho-Oh. There aren't too many versions of Lugia, but I do think these cards, while not being the absolute best deck in the game, are very solid and you can climb with them super well. The nice thing about Ho-Oh EX, of course, is with 3 energy, it generates 3 energy every time it attacks, the exact 3 energy you need to attack with Lugia. You can pair Ho-Oh with a lot of different cards for this reason. Lugia, on the other hand, absolutely loves to be paired with Ho-Oh. It's its best pairing, but you can play it with things like Magby, Pichu to generate fire and lightning energy, run water energy in your deck, and power Lugia up without Ho-Oh entering the fray. This is a little trickier, but it does stop you from bricking certain times that you're running a deck list like this. I really love these two as a combination. Again, in the meta, I would say this is probably like a B tier deck. You're gonna have some pretty good games. You're also gonna have some games that you brick with it, but 180 damage on Lugia is amazing. If you do set up Ho-Oh and get to attack twice and set up either 1 or 2 Lugias on the bench, it's almost a guaranteed victory. Next, let's talk about Donphan EX. Donphan EX is actually a pretty dang solid card, and there are a few fun decks with it. There's Donphan Rampardos and Donphan Lucario. Talking about Donphan Lucario first, this is my favorite version of it, is playing Donphan Lucario and Hitmontop. Once we started playing this with Hitmontop, I felt like all of our games started going way, way better. Hitmontop is essentially the fighting version of Pheromosa, able to attack in the active spot and hit the bench. It also powers itself up with Lucario, which feels kind of busted sometimes, and it gives you enough time to power Donphan on the bench. Another deck we could take a look at is the Donphan Rampardos. This was run by a player named Nope in the recent Ursi Day tournament. This is 2 Phanpy, 2 Donphan, 1 Cranidos, 2 Rampardos. And the idea behind this is very simple. You are guaranteeing that you're starting with Phanpy Donphan and you're powering up the Rampardos on the bench as quickly as you can. I don't know if this is as good as some other Rampardos variants, but it's a super fun way to play a full fighting deck with Donphan and with Rampardos. Obviously, Rampardos is quite good in Silvally Rampardos and Garchomp Rampardos, and it's just a really, really good card that can slot into a lot of decks because it does too much damage. Next, I want to talk to you about Dragonite EX. I posted a video of this deck the other day on my channel. This is actually a pretty solid deck for climbing ranked. It gives you a lot of fun options to play around with, and because we have these no retreat baby Pokemon that also generate energy that you need for Dragonite, and we have Lyra allowing you to make this really, really clutch retreat play as soon as Dragonite gets hurt, Dragonite EX has gone from being like kind of okay with way too many steps to being an actually good, consistent deck that you can climb with. I think the Lyra combination is extremely important, so make sure you have 2 copies of that in your deck and use those babies to power up their Dratini on the bench. I said Dratini on the bench. Then you can rare candy it, move it into Dragonite, bring it into the active spot, and as soon as your opponents hit you, you can dance around back and forth with Dragonite, doing absurd damage. And there are other times where you don't actually even need to retreat Dragonite. It can sit in the active spot and tank some damage. So if you're not able to make that play right away, you'll still oftentimes, not always of course, but oftentimes be okay because you have so much HP as Dragonite EX. Our next new EX Pokemon I want to talk about is Skarmory EX. Skarmory EX is actually pretty dang solid, able to attack for 70 damage with 2 energy, which isn't something to really write home about. 140 HP is not the best. However, it is able to tank an extra 20 damage every time you attack. With Jasmine, it's able to tank an additional 50 damage, and with Adaman, you can tank an additional 20. Steel Apron, the new tool, works very well for it, stopping any status conditions, healing status conditions, and allowing you to tank extra damage, another -10 every turn. You can use the version that I was playing on stream the other day, which we're taking a look at right now, or we can take a look at this one that just did well in a tournament. This is from a player named Roderick, and they got pretty deep in the large Ursi Day tournament with only 1 base Skarmory. So it's 2 Skarmory EXs, 1 base Skarmory, and you still have 2 Jasmine, a Cyrus, a Guzma, a Sabrina, a Silver, like just so many cards. This kind of feels like an Articuno almost, Articuno EX from early on, but it's not as cheesy where you just flip Misty Heads and that's how you win, right? You have to make a lot of decisions, and your big decision with this deck is going to be what supporters you are going to use that turn. Your game will be won and lost based on what supporters you are able to use that turn and if you make the right decisions with this deck. The big ones, of course, being Jasmine. Knowing when you can use this card for maximum effect, stop your opponents from dealing that knockout blow, or just stop them from chipping any damage towards you early in the match. That way they can't KO you later. Next, let's talk about Crobat EX. I love Crobat EX. It is so unbelievably powerful. For a single energy, you're doing 70 damage and you're poisoning your opponent, and your HP pool is insane. It looks like one of the most consistent performing versions of this deck is the Crobat EX with the Sylveon EX, so that you can more easily draw your stage 2s and get them online. Obviously, when you're running a stage 2 deck, nothing is more important than being able to get enough cards so that you can rare candy and put those bats down in a one big fell swoop, and this deck allows you to do that. The version we're taking a look at right here is from a player named Aidox. I hope I'm saying that wrong. Aidox. This is 2 Zubat, 2 Crobat, Eevee, Sylveon EXs, and 1 Darkrai EX, as well as a ton of good supporter cards. The big thought behind this deck is quickly getting your cards online so that you can do maximum damage with Crobat. That's the important thing. If you're ever running Sylveon EX in your deck, which many decks are, it's so you can quickly get your cards online. And when a card like Crobat only needs a single energy, all you're looking to do is draw. That's it. You have to get your cards, and this allows you to do that. We can also take a look at my Crobat EX that we built like the first day of this set. It has some fun stuff in it, like Dark Pendant and Silver and things like that. We were trying out a lot of the new cards, and this deck actually performed really well for us also. Next, I want to talk quickly about Magcargo. This is a very silly, stupid deck. It's annoying and it's dumb and it wins games. It's a ranked climb. You could climb to master rank with this deck, 100%. You absolutely can. It's better when you're going second, so you get your energy. If you can get Magcargo online, you can win games. If you can't, sometimes you don't. You win a surprising amount with it. It's hard to counter, right? I mean, it's a gambler's deck. This feels a lot more similar to Articuno EX, honestly. I can't say I would recommend this deck for the skilled play that it delivers, but if you're trying to grind a pretty hilarious deck, it would be Magcargo. Oh, I should mention, you might be looking at this Magcargo and going, why the Gladion Silvally? So the idea behind this is you guarantee you're still drawing your Slugma with this deck. You use Gladion to pull Silvally into your hand and then Calms to find your Magcargo. The most important thing with this deck is getting Magcargo and allowing yourself to attack. There is no other considerations to be made. Get Magcargo, attack. If you can do that, you might be able to win the game. I want to briefly touch on cards like Lantern EX, Shuckle EX, Umbreon EX. I think all these cards have some decent application, right? Kingdra EX maybe doesn't, but they don't seem to be particularly great in the meta right now. Umbreon has a few decks that it seems to be okay in. It feels like Umbreon Greninja might be one of the closest ones to it. Kingdra, unfortunately, just feels like too slow. I mean, 2 energy to only do 90 just doesn't feel like enough. It's got the same HP pool as Crobat, but it takes an additional turn to power it. I've been working on trying to find a good Kingdra deck, and Lantern, unfortunately, just doesn't do enough damage for 3, right? The Paralyze effect is amazing. Confusion, not so much. But in general, this just doesn't do enough. Then we have Shuckle. I actually love Shuckle as a Pokemon, and we had a great win streak in Master Rank with a Shuckle Exeggutor deck. I do think it's not a very good card. It's kind of a really bad card in some ways. So I don't think any of these decks are particularly meta, but I just wanted to bring up these cards to talk about them for a moment. You may see some really cool stuff be created with them, or down the line, they may become much better. However, every set has some EX duds, and I think these ones are closest to that. Next, a deck from Extra Dimensional Crisis is still crushing it right now, and that is Buzzwole, Pheromosa, Celesteela. This thing is amazing. We actually have some Guzzlord too that's doing well in the meta, but Buzz doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Crazy good damage, plays well into the meta. It allows you to take a lot of great supporter cards. Leaf Cape is obviously pretty incredible to run on a grass deck like this, and Pheromosa is still really, really strong. You could play versions of this with or without Kartana. Kartana, the nice thing about it is it can KO a baby in a single hit. Buzzwole can as well, but it requires 2 energy to do that. Pheromosa, on the other hand, cannot. So that is a consideration as to whether or not you want to run Pheromosa or you want to run Kartana also in this deck. The version we're going to look at here is from GACKT, GACT. And they did very well in the recent Ursi tournament with this Buzz going 8-3. This one not running any Kartana, but I still think Kartana is super viable in this deck. This version here is running a Kartana. It's also running the new silver. This is from SG Darkest. This did very well in the tournament also. So if you were looking for one of these 2 versions of Buzzwole, this is a great way to play it also. I think I probably would personally run Kartana just because it gives you a lot of great opportunities to get an early point against any deck running babies. And there are tons of baby decks out there. Boy, that sentence sounded wild coming out of my mouth. Speaking of Extra Dimensional Crisis, if you would like to play something like Guzzlord, here is a version of this deck from Magma Osoma. This is the Guzzlord Naganadel deck, still very, very powerful. Guzzlord is just a great Pokemon, able to do a lot with a little energy that has been generated by your other cards. Everything that gets KO'd with energy on it, everything that retreats, allows you to Lusamine Guzzlord. Tons of HP on this thing, 170 as a basic, and the ability to steal energy away from your opponents with Grindcore is actually super, super solid. There are a lot of cards in the meta right now that love trying to generate energy. Like if there's a Ho-Oh in the active spot on the enemy side and you can Grindcore it multiple turns in a row, you can set them so far behind. Moving from Extra Dimensional Crisis, let's talk a little bit about our most recent set before this, Eevee Grove. We still have a lot of powerful cards from Eevee Grove. Sylveon EX is obviously insane. We're going to take a look at right now the Flareon Leafeon deck. This was a version recently played in that big tournament from a player named Dial out of Japan. This has the Eevees, this has Leafeon EX, Flareon EX, a base Leafeon, one Sylveon EX, Professor, Sabrina, Mars, Red, Pokeballs, of course a couple of Eevee bags, and a giant cape. Still a really powerful deck, a tricky one to pilot if you've never done it. I have a video of it on my channel if you want to take a look. This is kind of a tough deck, right? Because you have to know when to have Leafeon in the active, generating extra energy, and when to put energy on that active spot, or when to just save it for Flareon EX so it can do a crazy amount of damage. Really fun deck, so wild, and still doing very well in this meta. Next, I want to talk about a couple decks that really love Sylveon EX. First up is Charizard EX, the Stoke Charizard deck. This is so good with Sylvie EX. You can build this with or without Flareon. We're looking at a version with Flareon. This is to help deal with Oricorios. Also, it does pretty solid damage on its own, and the nice thing about the Stoke Charizard setup is Stoke Char doesn't require much energy investment from you. Once you put one on, you can stoke, and then your following turn you can attach extra energy. So this allows you to power something up like that other Flareon, or even just add energy to your Sylveon so you can retreat from the active spot after you've used your Eevees to kind of dig through your deck. Char is super strong, huge amount of HP, crazy good damage. We're taking a look at a version of this played in the recent tournament from a player named Hanamon out of Brazil. This is a great version of this deck. I've seen some other versions recently running X Speed, which could be kind of powerful. X Speed obviously allows you to retreat something that has energy on it already and not lose that energy tempo. I don't know that that's extremely important all of the time with this deck, but it can help if you're in sort of a tricky position and you're bricked a little bit when you're trying to build your Char. Next, one of the most frustrating decks to face in the game. This is Sylveon EX Greninja with Giratina. We're taking a look at a version of this played in the tournament by Minato. This one actually didn't do amazing in the recent tournament, but every time you are running into ranked, you are going to run into this deck. If you play like a series of games, you will run into Greninja, Sylveon, Giratina. It is so hard to stop this thing. It is so hard to slow it down. It gets all of its cards out like in a single turn. Greninja's chipping you the whole time. It's a really fun deck to play. It's kind of miserable to play against, and it is still very, very meta. Next, we can talk about Sylveon Solgaleo. I think Solgaleo Shinada could also have its moments in this meta. It didn't do super well in the recent tournament, but Solgaleo is still incredibly powerful. 120 damage for only 2 energy. It also avoids a lot of annoying stuff by being able to rocket itself into the active spot. So even if you're stuck there by some, move like Kingdra has used, you're able to move right into that active spot. Even if the Pokemon in the active spot is paralyzed, Rising Road will get you right in there. This deck, I think part of the reason that it's not absolutely crushing it right now in this meta, some of the things it's running into, it just can't KO fast enough, right? Other times the 120 was enough to KO really quickly, but it's still extremely strong. It gets going very, very fast, and if you can get both Solgaleos out, it's such a hard deck to shut down. Next, I want to talk about Silvally, a card that feels like it might be around forever, right? Just so incredibly powerful. If you use a supporter on your turn, you're able to swing for 100 damage on a non-EX Pokemon. There are a few versions of this deck that are still very relevant. I want to take a look at this one from a player named Darius Popek that did very well in the tournament. This is Silvally Oricorio with Pichu and Magby. So the Pichu and Magby obviously can set up your cards to be able to attack very quickly and create a little bit of a wall early. With the free retreat, you're able to move in and do some serious damage. Oricorio is Oricorio. Unbelievably powerful, frustrating for decks with tons of EX Pokemon to deal with. A lot of decks build counters to it, some decks don't. And when you run into a deck without a counter, you get some easy wins. That's pretty amazing. The babies added to this deck just make it even faster, which can be really tough to deal with, right? You can quickly get your Silvally online and swinging for 100 with the free retreat cost of that baby Pokemon. Next with Silvally, we still have Silvally Rampardos. There are actually a few Silvally decks running around, but this one I still see on ladder a bit. Probably not as common as it used to be. I think there are other great options, and more people are playing Silvally with things like Oricorio and Arceus and things like that. But Silvally Rampardos is still great. You guarantee that you start with type Null into Silvally. You power up Rampardos on the bench. This is one that was played in a recent tournament, the Magma tournament by a player named Ventry. Is a pretty solid deck. It's running 2 silvers now, which is really funny because you need to play a supporter. This allows you to play a supporter, disrupt your opponent's hand, also know exactly what they got, and do 100 damage. Crazy. Silvally's crazy. Next, I want to talk about Tapu Koko EX and Arceus EX. There are a few Arceus EX variants out there, but I don't think a ton of them are that relevant outside of this one and then maybe Arceus Babies, which is just Arceus with a ton of the babies and an Oricorio able to do some really annoying stuff. This version right here was played by a player named Erenjim Museum. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong because it sounded crazy coming out of my mouth. This is 2 Tapu Kokos, 2 Zeraoras, 2 Oricorios, and an Arceus EX. Obviously, this lets you do some really powerful stuff with Electrical Cord and Elemental Switch. Elemental Switch, such a good card. You see it in a lot of baby decks as well. A lot of decks with Lugia, Ho-Oh, they could definitely run it. The ability to move energy quickly, especially in some of these lightning decks, is extremely powerful. Obviously, if you start with something like Pichu in a baby deck, you send energy back on turn 1. On turn 3, you could retreat and attack for something with 2. If you are on turn 2, you could set up a scenario where you're attacking on your next turn with 3 energy. You know, it's just really powerful stuff. And with a card like Zeraora, you can attack on your second turn, starting turn 1. You can attack on your second turn. The energy from the baby, the energy from Zeraora, the elemental switch, all of a sudden Arceus is swinging right away. Crazy, crazy strong. This deck is not using that exact strategy with the babies, but it is running Zeraora, which could make some big plays like that. And now great news. The winner of the recent largest tournament in Pocket is not Greninja Sylveon. It's Darkrai Giratina. It's back. Yay! This was run by a player named Luffy, running 2 Darkrai, 2 Giratina. It had Professor's Research, Red, Pokemon Center Lady, Cyrus, Leaf, Silver, Guzma, Mars, 2 Pokeballs, 1 Potion, 1 red card, 2 Rocky Helmets, and a giant cape. The idea behind this deck is you stink, and everywhere you walk around, people can smell you from really far away, and people look at you and go, "Does that person really smelly?" And everyone goes, "Yeah, they stink really, really bad." And then people will come up to you that you don't know, and they'll go, "Hey, did you smell that guy from earlier?" And you'll go, "I think I did." Other than that, this deck actually has kind of a lot going on when it comes to what decisions you make. I do think there are a lot of important decisions you have to make with a deck like this to win your matches. The supporter card you play, all of that, it matters. However, when you start with Giratina and Darkrai, and you're able to power up Darkrai, chipping at your opponents, and then just power up Giratina, it also can make your life pretty easy. I just do have to warn you, if you play this deck, you will lose a good relationship with one of your close friends. Up to you. Now, there are a lot of other decks in the meta that we could sit here talking about, but these are some of the biggest and the best right now. Of course, I'll have new videos on my channel every day with a lot of the fun decks we are trying. Xatu Typhlosion, springs to mind. Our Shuckle Executor was really, really fun, and more cool stuff coming soon. And yes, one day we will make Kingdra work. Maybe. We'll see. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I love you. I'll see you all next time. We did it. The new meta.